So we can actually start, and maybe we can just introduce a little bit each other, because I think I know everybody, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the people know each other. It actually takes a lot of time for me to figure out that, because it feels very intuitive that if you know people, they should know each other, just obviously, because you know them. But it's not necessarily true. So why don't we do the following thing? I will start with one person, and that person just select somebody else, and in this case we can kind of introduce each other. Okay, Tina, why don't I start with you?
Yes. Dina, I don't know you, but Anna and Eugene and I have contact since some years ago. I'm in Sweden, and I hold a PhD in educational science, and I'm very interested in dialogic pedagogy. And also I have a background as a music teacher in primary school, all ages. But I think it's boring to narrow down my research just to be about music didactics. So I wish I had more time to do research. The last year has been a lot of teaching. I teach teacher students of all kinds. And also now I'm working also in, what do you say, postgraduate? Is it the right term for doctoral studies?
It depends. If you talk about American way, I think American postgraduate means postdoc. But European postgraduate means what in the United States called graduate. So it's very confusing.
Yeah, very confusing. But I mean, in the American way, then I mean, after their ordinary education and more research oriented.
So that's postdoc, what the United States called. Okay.
Yeah, and I chose Dina because I'm curious.
Hi, thanks. So I've just set up my profile picture because my camera broke today, so I can't be on camera. Sorry about that. I am originally from Moscow. I live in Uganda, and I have been involved in creating a democratic school in Moscow. So self-directed education is an interest of mine. I am thinking about starting something in Uganda, so we'll see. I am currently doing. I joined this community of navigators, people who help groups, individuals, or projects, mostly educational, navigate. Kind of, it's to do with futures practices, and and with bringing in change. So it's also to do with this big Theory U thing from MIT in Boston by this guy Otto Scharmer. I don't know if I'm talking too much. Anyway, so I'm interested in self-directed and dialogic pedagogy. I also teach, and I enjoy these meetings and conversations. Today, sadly, I have to leave at 7 my time, so in 50 minutes.
Okay. And Dina, where are you right now? In Moscow or in Uganda? Because I am
in Moscow. I'm flying in less than a week, hopefully.
Okay. That's why I'm confused, because I saw you definitely in Moscow recently. That's why I'm saying, oh, you are. Well, okay. So who's next, Dina?
Anna.
Okay.
Hi, for those who don't know me, I'm Anna Marjanovic-Shane. At the moment, I'm in Belgrade still for another week, and then I'm flying to Stockholm, to Sweden for another week, and then back to Philadelphia. I am studying and interested in self-education or democratic education, really, and most of all dialogic pedagogy. And yeah, I'm part of this group for a long time and will continue. That's mine. So who is the next?
I think Shahidah, because she's the only person left. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Good morning or good evening. I'm not sure. I think we're all in different time zones. So it's really great to be seen by you all and to see you all. My name is Shahidah Kalam. I'm in the Philadelphia area. I'm a high school teacher. I teach at the oldest Quaker institution in the country. That's the Williamson Charter School. So it's over 300 years old with 300-year-old baggage, which is great. And my interest, I met Dr. Matusov a very long time ago now when I was applying to PhD program at University of Delaware and sort of did a silent protest against taking GREs. And so our relationship began and has continued. And he also lives in Germantown, which is where I grew up. So lots of nice connections there. My interest is really in dialogic relationships in different contexts. So whether that's in community and whether that's in schools or other types of institutions. I would say that my work is really about relationship building and building what Martin Luther King called the beloved community, wherever I find myself. So thank you.
Okay, well,
so Doc is you.
Thank you. Thanks, Shahidah. Yes, you're my neighbor and Anna's neighbor as well. We live in the same Germantown. So just let me show you this short article that we're discussing, which is Curriculum for Disobedience, Raising Children and Transform Adults, and Transform Adults. That's very interesting title. And why don't we just open discussion about this short article about this German, I don't know how to pronounce that, Kinderladen or something like that. I don't know if my pronunciation is correct or not. So it's a very interesting experience in the 70s. We can start, you know what, we can start probably going in the circle and to just pick up on something that attracted your attention. And maybe we can start with, if you don't mind, Dina, with you, because I'm worried that you don't have enough time for discussion. So why don't we prioritize you and start with you, Dina?
I did not have the time to read that. So
okay.
I'm here to listen and maybe talk while in the process when I understand. I just thought the topic was so interesting, so I jumped on the call.
Yeah, it is. And it's relevant for our other discussion that we just recently had on the Facebook. Yeah. I don't know, Tina, do you want to start in this case? Did you read the article?
Yeah, I can. I have some reflections, of course. First of all, I think what's the interesting question here, very thought-provoking question, is whose voices are really addressed? I mean, whose voices are at stake, the parents or the children's? And the answer is also very interesting because it's both. We can discuss what you think about it, of course. But that was. Can I mention some more things that caught my attention? There are at least two. What is it? Ironies? Did I pronounce it correctly? Irony, or paradoxes, or what you would call. I write it here in the chat. There are at least two I found, and one of them, the authors explicitly call an irony, and they are very interesting. The first one, I use my, wait, I will look at my, here. The first one is mentioned on page 29, the PDF 29, and it's about the parents' intention was to avoid the focus on child rearing that has their parent generation had focused a lot about. But the irony is that it ended up themselves focusing a lot on child rearing. Are you with me?
Yeah. Is it? I'm just showing the page. Is it that page 29?
We see 29. I have noted. Yeah.
Yeah, this is, I think, the ironic. I can see at least one place.
Yeah, that's yeah, exactly. So if you want, we can discuss that first, or I can also tell the second one. You can choose how we.
Let's put everything first, and then we go deeper.
Okay. Then I have one more, and it's about the irony about the result of this project. It's also that the interesting intention here was to learn to undo the authoritarian personality. You know, they have been shaped, the parents, in an authoritarian way, and they wanted to escape that way. But on page 32, the PDF, they say, thus, aspects of this self-transformation ironically reproduce authoritarian thinking. Because the parents went to teacher, and the teacher were authority figures who told them if they were right or not. And yeah, so that was, I think, a very interesting results.
Thank you. I think that's very interesting. And let's continue in the kind of things. So the next person, if you want to talk about that, Shahidah, you and if you can share like whatever attracted your attention, big kind of things.
Well, it's funny because one of the things is Dina, that's the person who just spoke. I think it delves into what she spoke about. But one of the things that I just picked up on after reading this article is that one thing that I think that activists, or just people in general, but particularly those people who are trying to create sort of an alternative, they don't account for the space itself as a third thing, as part of the dialogue. So what I mean by that is, Dina mentioned, they were trying to do something, but they put themselves in a space, in a context that has a context, school, namely, if you want to put it in a school, you take it outside your home, and then you're trying to do something. There are some things that I think inevitably happen, particularly if, maybe even if you do attend to it. So I think that irony is, yes, I'm sorry, friends. Got a little person here. So that's one of the things I thought about, is the space itself as a part of the dialogue, and how do we account for, include that in our conversation, if you will. I mean, does that make sense?
Thanks, and we will go in depth on that, Shahidah, don't worry.
Okay.
Just like we.
So I was looking a lot about the architecture, some of the description about the architecture of both the space and the sort of paradigm they were trying to build. I just wanted to condense it into two like concepts that like my reading focus were.
Very interesting. Thank you. And Anna, what's your kind of foci?
Focus. Okay. it's very interesting because I knew about this movement for a long time ago. This is not the first time that I heard of that. And for a long time ago, I tried to get the book by Katarina Ručki, Schwarze Pädagogik, or Black Pedagogy, or Poisonous. I like that they translated because that's that meaning. And I always thought about it as really a revolt that's part of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s across all the disciplines in the social sciences, in education, in philosophy, and also political movements. And so it's also a reaction, I would say, especially in this area of preschool education. It's a huge reaction to the horrors of the Second World War in Germany, when the generation of the after war young adults, because they came of age and started having children in the 60s, they were born either during the war or just after the war, when they really did not want to make the same mistakes. I think it started to dawn on them how horrible it was, the war in which their parents and grandparents were perpetrators. But yeah, I think they were very much wondering how to do that, and not seeing I don't think that they were satisfied with what they were doing themselves, but they were trying to somehow empower the children not to be blind like their parents or grandparents were. And at the same time, they did not know how to put the boundaries to that. And to mine, when I was reading this, of course, I saw the same ironies, especially this, can guidance be not authoritarian? I think that what they really lacked this perspective, that's dialogic perspective, because it's like people are not considered as people with whom you can talk. I think that there are two kinds of rights. One is the consciousness of equal rights, but another thing is that within that, in the dialogue, but within that, it's also very important to acknowledge the differences between people, that adults and the children are not the same, and that their relationships are defined by all kinds of obligations of the adults and non-obligations of the children, and other things like sexuality or not sexuality, or to privacy, not privacy. So all of that, those differences, they try to erase all of that, but it just doesn't work like, to me at least, doesn't work like that. So I think they try to equate equal rights of consciousness with like equality of people in every situation to do whatever they want in every domain. And it just creates a very difficult situation, I would say. That was my whole impression.
Thank you. Well, let me start with that. I completely disagree with you, Anna. There is absolutely zero equal rights between children and adults. You actually, Tina, you raised a very good question about voices. I don't hear children's voices at all there. It's only adults. Even, adults, in my view, abusing children because constantly. It's throughout.
Yeah,
It's a total abuse, and I'm glad that they document that in a way. They're not critical about that, but it's total abuse in my view.
Yeah, but
basically, what's happened? Just Anna, let me finish. They move from a right-wing totalitarian regime to the left-wing totalitarian regime. It's a completely totalitarian, and it's. I don't know even where to start. It's a very abusive place because adults are only self-centered. They can concerned about their own life. They see education instrumentally in order to build ideal utopian, extremely totalitarian in my case, leftist totalitarian society. And that's why they criticize. This is what, Tina, you're bringing this irony. They look for freedom. but it's positive freedom using Berlin's terms, which creates this terrible totalitarian abuse. It's nothing to do with education. It's molding children in the way how they want to be. It's interesting that, in my view, that they constantly disagree with Summerhill. And actually, reading that, you can think, wow, Summerhill is so deep and so right in many ways. And because exactly it prevents from that type of abuse and totalitarianism that this type of education creates. I want to attract your attention to these very interesting topics of the even title of the article, curriculum for disobedience, which is contradiction in terms in my view, because it's a teaching curriculum. It's adults decided we need to teach disobedience to them, which is it's imposition of the curriculum on children. It's not a children agenda at all. It's the adults agenda. And then they talk about disobedience. And of course, disobedience, they understood in very funny ways. It's a group which is adults decide what group it is against some kind of external things, like the examples of there is in the park, it's a message, don't walk on the grass. And adults say, no, we will walk on the grass. And which is hilariously funny, that type of disobedience. Is it disobedience? It's somebody else decide what to disobey about that. And now you must disobey. Just everything is twisted in my view, in this kind of the whole experiences, very much twisted. And that's kind of, for me, it brings interesting. I really like this idea to think about education for disobedience. And I think it's very interesting. But in my view, this is a good example how not to do it. And on another hand, let me tell you that I really like this article in experimentation of. I like that they try to experiment with genre of scholarship in that article. And I think, in my view, they're pretty successful. It's very short, but nevertheless, it's very dense with images, with discussion. I would like to make it a little bit more critical than it is. And they don't see, because they buy this leftist totalitarian thinking, in my view, they don't see the authors. I'm talking about the authors. Many things. On another hand, they rather honestly still pick up on many issues. They're not going deep in that. And I'm glad that they really put in a position to the Summerhill, because many things become much more visible in this opposition to the Summerhill on their issues and how they criticize Summerhill. And this is, like I said, wow, I'm definitely on the side of Summerhill, not on their side at all. So anyway, that's my big thing kind of things. So now we can open just in whatever way people want to talk. Let's talk about it.
How long did it last?
That's a good question. What's your? I don't think they said that, or maybe I missed that.
I don't think it lasted more than 10 years. It was an informal movement because it was not. Germany did not have a organized preschool or a daycare center. It was very expensive, really, for people. They tried to keep the cost low. But a lot of parents worked there, as you can see. They were not there only just because they wanted to be part of the community, but also they had to. They just didn't have any choice. They had to sustain that. So I don't know when it stopped.
What age were the children?
They were, I think, from 3 to 6, because kindergarten, or Kinderladen in this case. In German, kindergarten is not the grade before the first grade, but daycare, and including the grade before the first grade.
Okay, can I just want to stick to Eugene's
Mhm.
point. Actually, I think the parents' basic idea is worse than just not. I mean, it's not just about not listening to the children's voices. I also noted that they are voiceless in this article. But what I think is worse is that they somehow are using the children as instruments or tools for their own therapy and own goals.
This is what
Dina, I
call-
think so. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Doc. Oh, go ahead.
No, Shahida, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So, Dina, I was just going to pick up on that. My notes were talking about this is really a response to the horror within themselves and their context, and trying to figure out through this particular relationship. So, in that sense, the focus here is a relationship with children as sort of maybe a healing modality, a way to they have authority to change this and have a sense of control in this. That's part of the irony, but then they end up reinscribing it. But I think that you're right. The endeavor is to, and maybe that's not visible enough to themselves, what they're trying to undo is the shame and this horror that's attached to. And so they're going to that location, which is the childhood, right, to try and undo it. But what they're missing is that no one engaged them as a child and made them a partner. And so they're not doing the same thing. So they're using the same thinking structures, right, to try and undo something, but you're just going to reproduce it because you're using the very same structures.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Mhm.
I just put the Wikipedia article about this Kinderladen, but unfortunately it's in German and I don't see translation. But I know that I don't know, Tina or Anna, if you can read in German, if you can find like until what, how long they existed. I kind of feel almost until 80s, but I could be wrong. It's couldn't read that. Yeah, for me, it's use. There's several things. It's use of education. It's use of children for their own good, and it's very questionable for me. Using like look at the title of the article: "Raising Children to Transform Adults." I would say, from kind of moral grounds, it's a very super problematic thing. Like, using anyone, but especially children, for self-transformation. It's I wish authors reflected on that.
It also does not say anything in the article on the web on Wikipedia about until when. Yeah, I think it lasted throughout 70s and just kind of like slowly dissipated. But nobody.
Yeah, what I'm wondering is what is available to them, though. I mean, it's sort of like the fish in the fishbowl, and you don't see the water, but the water is there. So, what is available to them to try and uninscribe these things? Thinking about the pieces of, what is their agency? What is their access points to something else?
Well, one thing that it's clear. This is very good point, question you asking. But one thing that it's what was available for them, Summerhill. The Summerhill experience by that time was very known in Europe and elsewhere. The book of Summerhill was published in 1960 in the United States. I don't know when it's in Germany, but I assume it's early 60s. And they're in contact with that. They argue against that. And they argue against that because they didn't like what they called individualism, which is, I disagree that it's individualism. And I disagree that Summerhill is based on that. It's caricature on Summerhill, which is presented in that article. It's complete caricature because, and this is what's very interesting in my view. And I forgot somebody in Out of Us said that, maybe Anna, no, it's not Anna, it's maybe Tina, you said that in a way it's very non-dialogic.
I
And
said that.
part of that, they don't understand disobedience in freedoms in dialogic terms, which is Summerhill exactly embodied this idea that freedom and disobedience is very dialogic, which means that you bringing your disobedience in the community and discuss, debate that. You debate your own rights, you debate imposition of your rights on other people, and other people push back, and you find some kind of compromise or solution of this difficult
That's
problem.
my point, actually. That's what
And you learn to articulate yourself, and some people will help you to articulate if you, especially when you're young. And talking about architecture, this is very interesting. Shahidah, you bringing that. I'm thinking about architecture not only in a kind of traditional way, but in a bigger way. One part of the architecture of the Summerhill is that they have multi-age community. And they don't have that. They have huge age segregation. And which makes it more difficult to do these dialogues and negotiation and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but I agree with you that they are very ideological, left, right, whatever, but they are using constantly something for something. Their disobedience is an instrument to fight the authoritarianism. It's not something that is necessary for any individual. Like, it's not a personal thing. It's some kind of like ideological thing now, and everybody has to behave like that.
And disobedience is, in my view, starts with the feeling of discomfort, of almost like oppression, again, in the strong word, which you, and it's relation, in a way, it's a building relational breakdown. This, what disobedience is. Means that there are some kind of rules, norms, expectations, desires that address at you, and you don't fit to this expectation, rules, desires, and so on and so forth, in obligations, duties. And you feel discomfort. First of all, as a discomfort, it could be even stronger than discomfort. Pain, this is many things, which kind of start kind of pregnant with relational breakdown. And it's usually, since you have relationship with other people, you have dependencies, you have many other things that go together. That's why that breakdown is very difficult to do, difficult to articulate, difficult to do, but it's very important to create environment, dialogic environment, first of all, where these things can get publicized, accepted, and discussed, negotiated, and so on and so forth, rather than suppress. And in their environment, it's absolutely suppression is the biggest thing. Even when they kind of things, they give this absolutely, from my point of view, bizarre about that sexuality. This is another interesting things about sexuality, and very bizarre when look like the kids, little kids get teachers or adult underwear and pull out pubic hairs and stuff like that. This is, for me, it's terrible oppression that's constantly going on there, because they don't understand the idea. What does it mean, disobedience, in my view? The disobedience is relational and it's dialogic, and it's an issue of negotiate, it's express your discomfort about this. And it's absolutely non-ideological in that sense.
Right.
This is what, Anna, it's always personal. Ideology comes later. It's a ideology comes as a tool to fight this on the bigger scale, when you need to fight it on the bigger scale. But you don't always need to fight it on the bigger scale. Like when you articulate as big structural things in the society, that you need ideology. When this discomfort become more than just personal thing, when you want to mobilize other people together to fight something that you think is wrong.
On a structural level.
On structural and more than structural, it could be inbuilt in the society, ingrained in the big thing in the society. But it always starts on the personal thing, that what you personally faced with that, and it's and you need to deal with that on personal level.
Mhm.
And the
Very
question is whether or not you have support from other people. First of all, to recognize that, to legitimize that that's okay, this is expected. You're always expecting that people will have comforts. Always there is possibility to step on each other kind of territories and things. It's normal. This is part of the human life. And the question is how to address that, how to deal with that, how to normalize that, how to publicize it.
I think this is, of course, secondhand, and I always knew only secondhand about it. But they are very shallow in that sense, because they have, and because they are authoritarian, really, themselves. They talk about self-control, but they also talk about group. Constantly, they want to create group, and they don't notice the disobedience actually, if you want to conceptually, it doesn't work with a group, because for a group to work very well, you have to have some rules and norms of group immediately. Otherwise, there are friction in the group, and disobedience is that friction, right? When you're stepping outside of the group norms and rules and values. And then they don't notice that this doesn't go well together.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that, could it be that it shines through that it is I think it's a dialectical reasoning here. I mean, in the sense, more dialectical than dialogic, because it's like they are elaborating with oppression or self-oppression or suppression. And, this, what do you say, contra ideas and counterpoints. Could you feel that also? I mean, that is not dialogic, but it is, they are elaborating with polarities in somehow. What do you think?
No, I think you're right, because remember that an article they mentioned about this neo-Marxist kind of and Hegelian, neo-Hegelian scholars that they were constantly discussing, like Marcuse, like Frankfurt School, all of that was in the air of that time, in the 70s and 60s and 70s. So I think you're right, Tina, that it was that's what they were thinking about, all of these categories, big categories, which they force on the children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
yes, and I mean, I think the teacher who let the children exploit her body, I mean, it's a kind of dialectics. Also, it's a kind of, now I'm trying to self-oppress myself. I mean, but still it's the dialectic dynamic, isn't it? This polarity thinking, I mean.
Yeah,
What also,
that's what I say. They go in opposite direction, but they find the same thing. This is what I think Shahidah was talking about. They look like they find that, but they actually, in a way, accept the bigger meta structure of this.
Mm-hmm.
right. And I was going to say a little bit more about that. I think what they end up doing is exploring, and Doc, how you put it, was going from one kind of extreme totalitarian on the left to the right. Is still transactional, right? And I think that that's oftentimes what ends up happening, is that one thinks because their perspective is different, they're not sort of using the same structures. It's still transactional. It hasn't really moved out of this space. The realm of transactional is actually not one, right? It's fairly big, and so people, I think, can make that mistake in thinking that they're shifting kind of from one into the other, that they've sort of stepped outside of the bounds of transactional, and actually they're still very much deep in it. And so I think that that's the other thing is they haven't been able to imagine. They don't talk about imagination, right, in this piece, because that is sort of the realm of children. They don't imagine being out of, right, that thinking. They're sort of still imagining within. One of the things they talk about was they still want group solidarity. They still, the things that they want is not in partnership with what children want. They're the other, partners, etc. It's still like there's still an agenda. And with an agenda, there's ideologies and there's routines, etc. It's still groupthink at the end of the day. So they sort of, it's pernicious, right? And they sort of can't get quite out of it because they haven't released themselves, right, of those desires. Instead of shifting to let me be one possibility, I'm not going to say this is the only possibility. It's like, let's be curious and see what I learn, right? Instead of like, what do I want to teach? I think that that's the other shift. As soon as you started wanting to teach, you have an agenda, etc., and you step out of being curious, because then you're asking genuine questions, not questions that you think already have an answer. Which I think in a lot of ways they think that freedom is a question that has an answer, and it's not an imaginative endeavor.
Yeah, I would just want to add to that what you said. It's not only imaginative; it's always dialogically it has to be dialogically found out what the freedom is in every possible situation, because it's not the same thing in different situations. I wanted to read the paragraph on page 23 of the PDF.
Let me
Yeah,
share
and can
this.
you just speak, because I think I was going to thank you, because I was going, we have different versions of it, so I don't know if I can find that page, but Doc, you're going to share it
Let
on
me
the screen.
share it. That's why I'm sharing. Just a sec. Shahidah, you can see this.
Okay.
So it's
Yep.
156.
Yes.
Thank you.
Parents endeavor to overcome their own assumptions and fears in other forms as well. Adults in the preschool pedagogy action group in Stuttgart determined that they would refrain as much as possible from telling children what was an appropriate plaything and what was off limits, which led to considerable anxiety for some of the adults, as for example, the children sought to build structures together with hammers and saws. This reminded me when I was reading to this junk play yards. We just watched the movie last week in our other club about one of these junk play yards, and it kind of like thought that that's a problem potentially with these junk play yards, because they also, in the name of freedom of children and non-oppression, let them do all kinds of things, even when they almost burn themselves. Without discussing with them much. The adults just standing on the side. It's a kind of very similar approach, not the same, but similar in that sense that you have to hold yourself out of the children's lives and not interfere. Instead of creating a dialogue about things, that why not say what you think? It doesn't have to be that you are imposing it. You can discuss what's appropriate or not with children.
I just want to attract your attention on this page. Thanks, Anna, for this page, because I want to attract to this picture and caption of this picture, which is very interesting. So it says, Picture 19, children's playthings or work tools. Saws, fire, garbage, saws, yes. Knives, no. And it's interesting, who said this knives, no? So you see, it's very contrast with the text that you just read. So somebody actually said knives, no, which is interesting because we know that the kids can handle knives. We saw many videos like 4 years old can handle knives, 6 years old can handle knives. Actually, in Africa, this Dina, I have a picture of that made by one of my friend anthropologist of 11 months baby using very skillfully machete, cutting fruits, and which is and you can see that by 11 months the baby knows how to do that. So it's a cultural thing, it's kind of training. But I agree, Anna, that's interesting things about not discussion with your concerns.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting. This is what I'm saying. It's very non-dialogic in that sense. That if people have concerns, why not to discuss that? By the way, that your concern doesn't mean that you're correct. The problem is with this attitude that adults constantly think that they know more than children and everybody else. And it's maybe true in some cases and not true in another. And this is without having these dialogues and discussions, you never know about that. And this is exactly looks like in this kind of, they don't have that experience, and there is no even place for having them. Unlike Summerhill, where or some democratic schools that we observed, when there is absolutely not a problem for adults or children to share their concerns about anything that they feel that they have any concern, which doesn't necessarily mean it will be appropriate, not appropriate. That's another story, how they deal with that concern. Like, for example, with the saw, what we saw, unfortunately, it's Anna and I only could see that video land. For me, what I saw was terribly dangerous thing. And I grew up in an environment like land, which is in Moscow, we were absolutely free to do many things. But there was a huge difference from what we see here in this article and in the documentary The Land. We had very diverse ages of the kids. And I remember one kid who was much older than me teach me how to use saw. And I still remember, and I still thought at that time, when he showed me how to do that, I thought it's absolutely genius. Because you know what he did? I just want to tell you because it's such exciting things. When I tried to use the saw, it was moving all the way like this, like we saw in the video land, which is very dangerous because you can easily cut yourself. What he did, and he put two kind of stools, Dina taburetka, together, and I had this floor things to saw that I wanted. He put there, and he showed me how to hold it, and I was sewing, and it was straight line, and my saw was never moved that because it was between two chairs, so it was very, very solid in a way you couldn't move that. I thought it was beautiful, and it was so safe. And it was all the kids were showing me. And later I was showing younger kids how to do that when they wanted to do that. I showed them, and I remember it's I still remember such an excitement that it was so simple. At the same time, it's working so beautifully. And this thing is missing there. And by the way, that all the kids were telling me, no, don't do that, what you're doing, because it's dangerous. And it's not effective. And it's super dangerous. And these dialogues that could happen among younger kids, older kids, and adults, it's, they try to stay away from that, which is, by the way, completely not how it's done in Summerhill either. In Summerhill, people absolutely could raise any concern or whatever they want.
And I think it's because they really created a democracy there where people can freely address other people as other person, not as a child or as an adult or something, person to person kind of. And so even if you want to stop, and of course, if you want to stop somebody from doing something dangerous, why is that oppressive? You always talk about somebody saves your life by pushing you or pulling you or something. Sometimes it's with words when there is such a danger, but you always have to discuss it. Sometimes after.
The thing is, in this particular case, you're bringing very good things about the danger. In Summerhill, you can stop person. A person might agree with what you stopped with or disagree. If it's disagreement, then you see this has become point of negotiation and communal issue, where the whole community will decide in this particular case, contextual, is it was violation of the privacy right or concern of the safety and well-being of another person, and how to go this way or that way. And I think that's exactly right. That you never know in advance which way it can go, and it's fine. This is where negotiation and dialogue happens.
Right. And then this teacher could not stop children from pulling down her underwear because of the principle that she would not she would violate some principle of stopping children. You should not stop children of doing what they are pleased to do at the moment.
And you see how and this is what Tina, you're talking about that, and I think Shahidah as well. They replaced a vertical tyranny to horizontal tyranny at some point. But they mix that because they also keep vertical tyranny as well. You can see that about knives and stuff like that. But this is the idea. Okay, so not vertical, not hierarchical, but horizontal. So everyone can do to each other whatever, impose their desire without any concerns about other people's freedoms and comfort and privacy and many other things. Safety, and that's why they created super abusive environment. By the way, I suspect that there was a lot of sexual child abuse will happen there, because adults, you see that they start saying, oh, maybe they should have sexual intercourse in the presence of the children. What if they can involve children in that? You see, everything starts. It's a slippery slope going there in that direction.
Right.
Yeah, so what I'm wondering about what you just said is democracy or dialogue just possible at any given point? And I think about the example you just gave of Germany and coming out of the experience that they came out of, right? Like what question I asked, like what tools are available to them? What would be the catalyst sort of alter that lens or create disruption? And yes, I guess that's what I'm thinking. Like what would be, do you know what I mean? Like what if it would have been a disruption or alter? Because since they had that experience, and they're really, it seems in some ways, trying to cope or deal with that, not realizing because they're not engaged, maybe they don't know about it, or to whatever degree they're not engaged in a dialogic, relational approach. So what would cause that disruption to do you know what I mean, to make that even possible? Because I mean, we see that in a lot of other places that have experienced horror, and then they try to undo that horror as if it can be undone. It's already done, but they try and undo it with the next generation by, in a lot of ways, creating different phase but same structure. So I'm wondering. Tell me if my question is not clear. So I'm thinking about it, Doc, as you were talking, but that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, you're asking a very interesting question. There is, because this difficult to put him, define his, I'm talking about Gregory Bateson, and I'm difficult to define. He's anthropologist, philosopher, cybernetics scientist, or whatever. He was so many things, Gregory Bateson. But he introduced a very interesting term for me, which is schismogenesis. And schismogenesis is kind of creating oppositional identity as a community, for community, not for the person, but as a community. Like for example, right now I'm seeing that very much discussions of that without using that term in a war between Russia and Ukraine. And many of my Ukrainian friends, and I see on the Facebook, because I participate, I'm very consumed by the war right now. And I see this schismogenesis is working in full scale. Like everything that is Russian, we're against. It doesn't matter what. But everything that Russians do, we will do oppositely. including language, culture, and many other things. And there are other people who try to move away from that schisma genesis and say, no. We should be very particular. We should not, in making opposition, we becoming kind of almost a twin. First of all, we develop dependency on the enemy because we constantly look up. Do the Russians do that or not? If they do that, we're opposite. Second, that what Russians something do, they may be not bad. And also something can be good that neither Russian not opposite to Russian, which can be something good as well, which is nothing. We don't need to have this dependency. We need to figure out like what's good for us. Whether or not it remind you Russian or not, it doesn't matter. So this is kind of alternative approach to this schismogenesis. Schismogenesis is a very mechanical thing, if you think about that. It's not dialogic. It's not deepen in meaning. It's deepen inventions. Great Gribatson, yes. Schismogenesis, yes. It's not genetics. No, it's schismogenesis. Genesis means development, because it's very active process. He wanted to say schisma, I think it's opposite. It's not from scheme. It may be related to that word, but it's opposite. It's genesis of opposition. This is my translation of schisma.
Schisma comes. It's not only opposite. It's a breakdown. It's like a break.
It's a breakdown, yes, but
it creates
like if
a
they
break.
do this, we don't do anything to them. By the way,
creates breaks.
Yeah, some anthropologists and historians now explain many things like it was very difficult to explain sometimes. You have in the past societies that have a very close contact, but they can be completely opposite on many things. And the people couldn't understand why is that. And this is what Gregory Bateson was explaining that. And exactly, they usually in contact, very close contact with each other, or had previous experience of that. And that was difficult to explain because before some people tried to explain these differences by geography, climate, and so on, so history, whatever, but they couldn't figure out like why sometimes a very close society can be such an opposite about use of technology or about practices, organization of their political organization, so forth. And this is a good example of the good tool to explain that. But some people say that Ukraine, I can hear discussions about that. We need to overcome that. We shouldn't. This is a trap. This is what Shahidah you're talking about. It's a trap. In a way, you're repeating that. Whatever, even if you don't like enemy, you become like enemy. But in opposite side, but on the bigger sides, it becomes the same because you become as intolerant as they are.
You know where you have a very good parody of that in Swift, in Gulliver. When Gulliver went to the Lilliput, they had a war with some other Lilliputians about the war was whether you should crack the eggs on the more spitz side or more narrow side, or you should crack the eggs on a little, like that flat side when you, like for Easter, and that was the war. One side thought that you must do this one way, cracking the eggs, and the other, and because of that they had a war, and that's exactly that.
No, that's usually it's a reverse thing, Anna. It's not because of that there is a war. It's opposite. There is a war and it creates opposition in opposite direction. It's not the causes working in opposite direction. You find any practices that the other side is doing, but because you're hating them, you're doing opposite things.
Yes, and then
and of course you can say, "Oh, I'll work because of that." No, it's reverse. Right. You're doing everything in reverse. That's how schismogenesis works.
Right. And we see partially also in our politics in United States between Republicans and the Democrats, like everybody is just going the opposite. If Democrats choose one strategy about the economy, the Republicans will say opposite, whether it makes sense or not.
Yeah,
Absolutely, and neither one is engaged in any dialogic, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
the same strategies, name
Mhm.
calling and, kind of denigrating the other person, and the whole, part of the Democratic, to me, big failure is that they're focused on a person like Trump to move their whole framework around, which isn't
Yeah.
necessarily that enticing, right? I mean, it can be, but
Mhm.
it seems to me these are sort of war ideologies, the kinds of things that happen when you have a war, and part of the propaganda that ensues from it.
Mhm.
I think the spelling is like that. Let me check that. Let me find that on the maybe Wikipedia or something. Maybe with explanation and working with that word. I missed S there. Yeah. So there is okay Wikipedia, but in my view, it's just yeah. I found it.
So,
I
I
missed
mean, we may,
S.
yeah, we may not have time for this now because I know I have to go. But one question that keeps coming up for me as I kind of listen and engage in these conversations is, are these structures possible in large groups when human beings come together and they socialize large groups, or is a way forward or autonomous zones? So I don't know. I mean, I would love to explore this more, and think about, because I know that a lot of times revolutionaries, et cetera, once they move to start thinking on a large scale, it seems inevitable that they reinscribe, the same things. And so I wonder if the target is the issue. Yeah, I would love to explore that more. I mean, especially as a teacher, high school student, I find that lots of schools and colleagues, they think that their mission is really great, but there is a part where it still can feel tyrannical, because it's, if I've heard people say, well, if you're not on board, then you can just leave, right? You're not on board with this really great ideology because this ideology is wonderful. Then you can leave. And so I'm curious, because I feel like that's a big piece of what's happening in many schools, even schools like, Quaker institutions that ostensibly are for peace. But I think because they're not necessarily dialogic conversations, they still are using these, say, other methods. So it feels very much the same.
One thing that I'm thinking about that, Shahidah, and I recently wrote an article. You know how in education, it's a very strong, I think it's very strong progressive movement. By the way, it's very interesting in that article, they constantly say we're not progressive educators, which is they are. It's a form of progressive education, what they're doing, despite the fact that they try to have a distance from progressive education. Anyway, but this idea that the view, what I call sociality or kind of social glue in the education, when it's joint education, and they usually define it as a community. And I came to the conclusion that it's a very wrong idea. By the way, this in this article, it's a very strong, of course, communitarism of this. And I think that it's more productive. And I took it from democratic school, by the way. And what's interesting is that they use a different form for that, and intuitively, not because they thought or thought deeply about that, but they use a notion of society, not a community. And the difference is between society and the community, that society built out of the several diverse communities. And when they do that, historically, they created some new thing that's called new entity that's called city. And many terms of our kind of political life and many terms of modern political life, on the quality of relations among people. Like, for example, the word civility, it's come civic, it's coming from the city, and city is not a community, it's a society. And in society, if you see what it allows, that not only it allows communities to have, but it allows strangers to be there and feel comfortable and feel protected. Strangers are accepted as legitimate in city, not necessarily in community. But in the city, it's expected that the strangers will remain strangers, and they will find having strangers in the city is normal. So what's normal in the city? You have strangers, which not associated with any community within the city. You have diverse communities, and with the idea that this conglomerate will live in peace, or trying to live in peace, without the idea that they have to have common values and common views. Although time to time they might, in some emergencies, that can call for some kind of cooperation, which is fine as well. They have some limitations, some boundaries that they build, but there is zero expectation that at some point all these differences will merge together. And there is zero expectation of the common values or emerging values that common will be for the whole city. No, it's not. And also disagreements about values and practices, it's okay and should be kept in peace from different ways, mechanism for the dialogue, for the democracy, which is dialogue and democracy, it's different things, through some kind of impositions, through limitations, through the rules, laws, and so on and so forth. Through the civility, by the way. Civility is coming exactly from that, because it's a tolerance of difference and normative tolerance of difference. If you want, Shahidah, you can email me and I can send you. It's not published yet. I hope it will be published next year. This article about where I can analyze the difference between community and society for education, specifically with the focus on education. And in this case, you're asking like, so a school, in my view, should be seen itself as a society, and there is a possibility of which is very, very good. It's kind of creating a mega society, which is conglomerate of the different schools that come together and creating a relationship with each other without any idea of developing a common interests or common values. I'm sorry, they could be common interests, but not and it's temporary. But it's I really like this notion, which is recently anthropologists, like historical anthropologists, they found a new excited things they call mega cities in Ukraine, and it probably exists in many other places. But the first thing they found in Ukraine, and which existed in hunter-gathering societies. So this was kind of proto-cities in conditions of the of hunter-gathering societies. By the way, it looked like they existed some kind of similar in different ways in North America as well, and probably in Africa as well, and maybe it's much more common than we think. It's just like the question is where is like remains of that. Like in Ukraine, it was much better due to climate preserved than some other places, but they found something similar, maybe not at that scale. And again, maybe they will find them in the bigger scale as well, but which disrupts all this idea that city is some kind of related to the agriculture. It looks like no, it's not. And the kind of mega, what they call mega, but they call it mega city because it's for back then it was considered to be huge. Like some of them were almost like 100,000 people lived there. And what's interesting, I saw, this is too bad that Shahidah something disappeared or she cannot be there, but it's from architecture point of view, because the city, that mega city was divided on the quarters, and each so-called quarter was occupied by the tribe, distinguished tribe. And which
slicing,
is
like of
the
pizza.
slice, yes, and they were, and within the tribe they had their own kind of rules, look like organization, like dwellings. The dwellings were similar within, but different from the next quarter. That was completely different and differently organized. There was no overall planning of this. You can see that it's just like spaces. Some were permanent, some were seasonal. But in Ukraine, they had permanent cities. But in North America, they have seasonal. So, for example, the tribes were coming together, spent some of them summer and some of them winter, on the winter, because it's completely interesting kind of way of organization. And then they moved away, and then come next year, they come again. And the political life was changing while they together versus when they were outside. That's very interesting. So anyway, but I think it's much more interesting to think about, move from the notion of community, which is very progressivist idea in education. The idea of this learning communities. No, it should be not learning communities, but educational societies. And that's, by the way, not by chance that, in my view, in the science, initially they were organized as a society, like Royal Society for Geography or Royal Society, not community, as a professional thing as well. Because they, in my view, they want to emphasize that they don't need to come to the consensus about many, many things. The disagreements are permanent, as permanent things. It's recognizable and expected and accepted.
I'm still thinking about this movement and why they were so authoritarian and oppressive, just exactly like those that they critique, and how they could not transcend actually themselves, except to like what's white to call black, what's black to call white, just.
Right.
Could it have to do with the lack of, we're talking about communitarism and society, but could it be that the link from community and the individual is lacking in this, also this left-wing extremism? And I mean, that's why the children are viewed like a group, a homogeneous group. And I mean, that's a problem. We need to accept their individualities and address them in education. So I'm just thinking about these three, levels: society, community, and the individual. And
well, I don't like to call it individual. It should it's such a bad thing. So let's call it person or unique person, because it's not. The word individual means atomistic, and this is not and this is what the struggle in the West. They constantly either almost like trapped by either atomistic kind of way of thinking, or it become communistic way of thinking, and there is almost no way out of this. And you see, if you think about a community, there is societal views which is not communal. And communal, there is nothing wrong in communal either if it's limited. Right. If there is a possibility to leave this community and survive, and this is what city allows. City allows people to leave their communities and survive, and live outside of the communities, or live in partial communities as well, not total communities.
And to rebel against community, because
it's so many possibilities, that new type of sociality of the kind of cities. And we also need to think about like person rather than individual. That's one thing. But another thing, this is very important, Tina. And another thing, which is I think related, is this attitude towards truth. Because you can see that they position themselves, they know the truth. It's about like this left politics. This is the true things. You have, and that's why they fight each other. That's why it becomes very quickly totalitarian or at least authoritarian thing. Because I know the truth, and you don't know. At best, you can become my student, like ignorant student, and at worst, you become enemy. Because if you insist on your ignorance, you become enemy. You become evil. Like instead of being ignorant, you become very quickly evil because you don't want to learn the truth. So you're on the side of Satan.
I agree, and that's what I was somehow termed I mean, it's a sign of this dialectical mode. I mean, you know, this oppositional, and so I think the dialogic thinking is lacking in, and I agree also with your critique that in the best words, the authors should have addressed that the critical perspective a little bit more. But I still love it, and I love also, as you say, I love the genre with the pictures and the insights you got from it.
I love the article because for me it's honest because this is their own blind spots, but at least they try. Like we all have blind spots, and I like their experimentation with the genre. And initially, I was irritated by that, but the more I was looking at that, oh wow, it's useful. And sometimes I really like that their picture contradicts their text. I think that's marvelous in that sense. I know that it's not intentional, but it's indicator of their honesty.
But I'll tell you what, I know these people very well. They are very honest people, both of them in their own way. Peter teaches actually math education at Arcadia, and he is trying to devise something himself. And the Belinda is a very eccentric person, but they are very honest people.
We can feel that. I mean, I just think they don't have the theoretical or philosophical tools to apply, but I mean, they seem curious and explorative, and the facts are very important to discuss.
Yeah, to learn. They spent some time in Germany. They were living for a year. And I guess they found out about this, and it was a shock to them. So it's they're trying to kind of figure out what it was, very, very honestly to study.
I'm always feel kind of story, and I don't know, Tina. Maybe you have an idea. A long time ago, I think it was 2002. Yeah. Just before there was a conference in Amsterdam. I think it was during that conference in Amsterdam on sociocultural conference in Amsterdam or activity theory conference.
I think it was
ISCAR, yeah, but I'm just thinking, is it that year or maybe even before when I was in Amsterdam? Anyway, around this time, I went to Amsterdam, and there is a very interesting museum in Amsterdam. It's called Museum of Childhood. It's located not of childhood, Museum of Childhood. Yeah. And it's located not far from this train station. You know that big train station. I just remember that big street, and I even know how to walk it a little bit and just get there, and you're there. Anyway, you can actually find, I think it exists. And when I was there was a video they showed. It's called The Holy Family. And this is exactly about this German experimentation. I don't think it was Dutch, it was German, about this kind of families, communal families. They try to raise kids together. It was not Kinderladen or whatever. It's just like families they really get together. And they lived like they were naked. They were, for some reason, this nudity was part of that, but many other things. And I was in negotiation with this museum to get a copy of this. I get in contact with them. And last moment, and I forgot what's this kind of stupid reason, they told me no. They almost sent it to me. And then they said no.
But did you, in the introduction here, they said they could not get permission to publish the photographs that children made of themselves playing because there is a lot of nudity there.
That may be why. I was visiting Amsterdam a few years after that, and there was not, the exposition was not there. But then I contacted museum and they say, sure, we will send, because I said, and the way how I wanted that our university library will kind of get there on there for them. And they say, sure, not a problem. And I said, our library even can pay like everything there because they didn't mind that to do that. But unfortunately, last moment they said no, and I forgot what it is, but maybe it's because something like it's like the children who grew up realized that it was not good. But although of course you will not, it's so difficult to recognize adults because the faces change so much that you will not recognize. But anyway, I can understand that. For me, even if they blur the faces, it will still interesting to see the whole experience. In my view, I would think that it's very abusive still, and I wonder how much. It's interesting if somebody of these children write memoirs about their experiences, because I think it was also great and terrible at the same time, because of the exactly not having any boundaries. One thing that they think, they create this pervasive informalities, which is, in my view, can be very oppressive.
Very oppressive.
Yeah, and another thing, you speaking about family, that is, they mentioned it in this article, and I know German old leftists, that I know that's a holy thing for them to deny children to have good relationships with their own parents. I mean, I think that's one of also morally dubious take, that's not it's an anti-dialogic stance, isn't it, to deny them. So it's also very interesting in this Kinderladen, the parents were there, but not in the role of parents. What if, do you know what I mean? It's, I think that's oppressive, or what is it? Or for it, I mean, it's not to build on relationships.
And it's the whole thing is interesting between relationship between the school and family, and it can go in many directions, and it's a good idea. It's about building boundaries, and the question is like, what's these boundaries is? What's the sphere of education? Like, for example, it's a very interesting discussion in the school, democratic school in Pennsylvania. They call the Circle School. And one of the founder of the school, they developed a very interesting ideas about what is the boundaries. And they have a very strong boundaries. They say, we are not interfering in the family. We're not telling about parents, what's the good parenting, what is bad. Even more, we expect that they will be different from the school philosophy, and that's fine. It's absolutely fine. We're not criticizing them, but at the same time, we are requesting the same thing in the school, and they say the school is, they define school as scaled down society to practice life. And they say, well, family has limitations because it's too close. It's too communal in a way. And we're trying to build society which is not that close. It's not that we don't have closeness. You can have closeness, but as the whole thing, it doesn't require that closeness. It's okay not to be to keep distance from somebody in the school, and that's cool. It's fine because That's part of this being in society, not in the community. But on the other hand, so we have like a boundary with the family, and but we're not like it's not like in this article when they almost dictate family how to be in the family because they're experts about things. But this is bring also this because I think that the whole this community is very oppressive both to the school and to the family.
Yeah, and also I think it's a typical collectivist. Isn't it too much collectivism to be dialogic? I mean, and also family should be unpersonal, and I think it's a little bit scary. And I know, you know, my own background is I have been an institutional child. I didn't have parents, so I really know how scary it could be if you just institutionalize childhood and children. You know, it's.
You know, when I was in Utah, I participated. My son and I, like, whereas a family, participated in the progressive school, but it was a teacher-parent cooperative. And we kind of, as a parents, were required to be in the classroom like 3 hours per child per week. And there is some adjustment if you have many kids in the school. It was not like that. It was not adding things up. But there was debate and we had meetings. Everything was run by as a cooperative, like as a teachers and parents. And there was a lot of discussion. So when and that's elementary school. So when you are in the classroom, is it okay if your child is sitting on your laps, for example? Or you need to keep and pretend that you're right now not a parent, you are just a kind of a worker in the cooperative. And there was big discussions of that. And I was always on the side that it's a crazy in a way. Yes, you are not exactly like a parent as at home, but it's a crazy just to say, oops, I'm strangers to you. Because we're now in the school, I'm pretend to be a stranger. And that's kind of, for me, is a strange thing to be. On another hand, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to behave the same way to other kids. This is what all this collectivistic idea, that equality, that you should be equal to other people, which is, in my view, means the only equal person can be if you're dead. In this case, if you're dead, you will relate to everybody else in the same way. Otherwise, if you're alive, that being alive is exactly to discriminate. You attach to something, attracted, repel, neutral, and so on and so forth. And of course, it doesn't make sense to suddenly become a call to your child just because you are in the school. And that's why you need to be, or you become as warm as to everybody else, which is impossible either.
Right.
And feels like betrayal, by the way, from the child point of view.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm coming to. It's really is a relational betrayal, and I agree with you. It's so strange, but it was a central goal for them in such collectivist education. So it's important to address it.
But it's more than just collectivist, it's totalitarian, because everything has to be on principle, this way or that way, through
yeah, it's a categorical.
I think it's a part, that whole thing, both left and right authoritarianism in education, part of this whole Enlightenment project. I think, because suddenly you have this push for being able to know the truth or the values, monism constantly all the time.
And also, yeah, sorry. No, Eugene, you were I just thought about the word here that may be relevant. Could it be that the premise here is reactive? So, I mean, as you write sometimes, Eugene and Anna, the ideal is if we don't react, we can just create something. If it could it be better? This is, I mean, a strong reaction. We can't be like this or that. And could it limit? I think it contributes to limitations, especially for the children.
In my view, we should be unique and contextual, which means unique and contextual, which means we can be called to respond on our deeds. So, which means responsibility, and this which means we have to be responsible. So it's okay to be different. It's okay to be inconsistent. There is no that's the whole thing. You don't know in advance what was the right way to act, and you don't even know that it's the right way what you did, and that's why you're ready to respond to challenges of your deeds to yourself and to other people, because you question, is it right or not in that particular case, not in general, but in this particular case. Like, for example, like I remember we had so many debates in this progressive school about like your favorite, you should need to favorite your own child. On another hand, you need to be fair to other, and there is many conflicting demands, which is in particular case, there is no formula for that. You need to do it in particular case in certain way, and then the response to that, to the challenges, is that because you prioritize this, like you prioritize your love to the child over demands on another child. Is it right in this moment, or is it not right in that moment? And why do you think it's right to do this way? Or in another thing, you prioritize concern of others because you feel it's fair or whatever. And so why is it right to do this way? So this is kind of interesting and important thing. And I think it's great. In my view, the fact that we don't have formulas, it's a terrific thing. It makes us alive. And we have this modernist and enlightenment project is to replace our judgments, our authorial judgments with formulas, universal formulas. And for everything to have a formula, or at least algorithm, or at least this pattern, some kind of smart pattern recognition, and so forth, which doesn't have any responsibility or anything like that at all.
But even if you just say to replace it with a principle, like principle.
The same thing, principle, yeah. Mm-hmm. Good person always should violate their own principle.
Yeah, that's a great. And also, I think isn't it a risk when you respond to society, but more responding to society than to the participant, the children. I think they are leading more to this society protests.
we almost don't hear what things that children think or how they feel, except a little bit about some of them want to pull out underwear of some teachers and pull out this pubic hair. Almost nothing is known about that, which is it interesting. We don't know how they feel. We don't know what they think about disobedience. You see, it's interesting even that this article doesn't raise that question. I understand that it's a blind spot for the authors themselves. I understand that.
Right.
But is it interesting what kids think about that?
Right. Exactly.
You should try to find. I also thought that when I read it, we should find some adults who can tell us about the experience in depth.
Who can tell us are very old, but the children who were then. The children are about Eugene's age, between me and Eugene, something like that, because it's the 60s, those are the children, and their parents.
Well, if it's 70s, they're a little bit younger than me.
Yeah, but so I say, or younger than you. So it's your age and younger, not between you and me, but younger.
Yeah, younger than me, because if it in 70s they were 6, and 70 I was 10, so it was we just very different age. It's kind of like little babies, not interesting. 10, 10 is very
Kids, like
different.
6-year-olds, like some little.
Yeah, they're babies, like 10 is almost like teens.
Wow. And imagine what's 20 at that age.
Oh, 20 is like it's let me tell you funny thing. My son, sorry, it's just like was 6 probably, 5 or 6, and he went to the summer camp in the Jewish community in Utah. And on the first day, he was very excited, and he said, we had very old counselors. And I said, like, how old? I said, no, they're very old, like very old. I said, how old? I said, I don't know, maybe even 15. Right. Ancient history, like very old.
But I remember when Ellie told me, my son Ellie, when he was 10 years old, and he said something like, oh, that happened way back in the 80s before I was born. And for me, it was like, what? Way back.
How are you
Yeah, and
feeling now,
another thing,
Anna?
my 20 years old.
No, sorry, I'm just asking how Anna was feeling, but Eugene, continue.
No, I'm just going to go on another side. My 20 years old students, undergraduate students, when we had a practical, they asked me very often whether or not adults will be with them. And then I said, I would think that you are adults. You're young adults, but you're adults. But they asked me, like, whether or not adults will be with them. It's an opposite direction. It's like going in opposite direction then.
That's true.
Yeah. But I'm glad that, by the way, this is my next project after I work on this issue of community versus society. My next project was exactly, I was thinking about like freedom, and this guy, what's his name? David, I don't know, what's anthropologist. Graber, yes. He died, and unfortunately his last book is terrific. And he just came to the most interesting things for me, and he died. How can he do that? Because of COVID. Anyway, he defined freedom. He made a kind of 3 aspects of the freedom, and I added to that more than three. But one of them is exactly this disobedience. Like without disobedience, there cannot be freedom, which makes perfect sense. And I was start thinking about developing that concept in education, and that's why I was looking. Nobody asked me, how did I find that article? I started looking for disobedience. But
there was one day when you and I went online, and I wrote the whole.
yeah, but we were looking at something, and right, and we will start looking anything on disobedience.
Exactly.
There is very little in education about disobedience, but that one article. And the other one, I have another one, but it's not very interesting, I think. I don't remember the other one.
I'll send you a whole set of links that we developed at the time when we were researching.
Yeah, but we developed after that article, and I found that for some other, I was reading something, and I don't remember what it was, and they mentioned about this disobedience kind of things, and they mentioned 2. The other one was, as I remember, not very interesting, but then we did other. Now I remember. Then we did a search.
Yeah,
but that's kind of on my.
paste. Maybe it's too much to paste at the same time from my notebook, but I could share this with you, Tina. Okay, I'll share. I shared with Eugene. Do you have a Mac? No, it doesn't matter. He can use it. Did you ever use what I sent to you? Yes, probably. Okay. How do I do that? Okay, it says that I've shared with one person, but how do I add people to share? Okay, let's see.
You can see right now your 3 of your article in thread.
In what? Okay, I'll do one by one. Okay, this is what I'll do. I will school
No, Anna. This is very interesting. You know what interesting? Sorry, I just realized that what I'm doing. I went to my EndNote, and I suddenly see that you shared something with me. And I
Yes.
click on that, and I see only 3 of your articles. That's what I see.
Really? Huh.
Uh-huh.
What did I share? I have to see that. That's not the same thing. I shared it from my notes, not from EndNote.
Was it Graber or was the name of the person you mentioned? Graber?
David Graber.
Graber.
Okay, let me.
Okay.
I put that book right now in, so you will find it.
Okay, thank you.
Then we had, we found all these references plus the one that we read today. I now put them all in the here on the chat.
Yeah, because I mean it's an interesting topic.
And we have that electronic version of that book. It's a very great. It's a great book.
Is he historic? He's not educational or
No, it's not. It's
David
not
Graber,
educational.
he's a sociologist and
sociologist? Okay.
and his co-writer David Vengrow is an archaeologist. So
He is not sociologist. He's anthropologist, to be exact.
anthropologist, yes.
Yeah, but he's not sociologist. But and he wrote together with historian, and this is very interesting book. You know why? Let me sell that book to you, Tina.
Yes,
I'm
please.
always thought I'm interested about hunter-gathering societies, and it's another story with educational kind of eye on that. And it's, if you read these books right now, scientific books about this, it's a very disrespectful approach. Usually, people in hunter-gathering societies, they compared with apes, or they look at the almost like deterministic machines based on their geography and many other things. And I'm always suffering for reading that. I'm still trying to read about that, but it's almost most interesting when they tell some story between the lines. And finally, I found this book, Graber, who is not like that. And he introduces completely humane approach to the history. When we see people as a people, not like they're deterministic machines or stupid things or completely bounded by necessity or even evolutionary apes or kind of evolutionary kind of thing. And this is very, very exciting to read. And they criticize all these approaches. And they defined people, first of all, by people who consider what's good, what's bad for them. And this is authorial way of doing that. There is no proof of something. That's why societies so different, can be so different from each other, are living at the same time. And in a way, it's more, and there is that question, and unfortunately, there is a wonderful question, and one of them, the most, David died, unfortunately. And the question is like, how come when we start building all this civilization and so forth, we kind of forget constantly debating what we're doing now about what's good for us and what's bad. The public debate almost like faded out and become difficult to do because of these hierarchies that develop. And he said that and he raised that question in the book, but unfortunately didn't answer to that. But he said this is what we need to wondering what's happened and why it's happened for that time. And basically now we're returning back to this to where we were, which is constantly arguing. And by the way, he argued that the people who put us back on track were Native Americans.
Mhm.
It's the Enlightenment, that part of the Enlightenment, it was contact with Native Americans and dialogues with them and disagreements with them. And what we call Enlightenment is actually, in a way, voices of Native Americans that we erased as if they are our voices, but they were not our voices.
But not completely, because they did not take some most important things from the Native American, and that's the dialogue.
No. Right. But it was that dialogue penetrated and created the so-called Enlightenment. But it's not like only things, and there are many other things that left aside and were kind of erased. But nevertheless, this Enlightenment, which is part of the Enlightenment, important things, people start debating about possibility for different type of society, which was not before. And that was also interesting. Like why we forgot all these debates about imagining a better society, which was very much commonplace in so-called prehistory time. And suddenly it was forgotten about. And that's also, and there is the question, and unfortunately he died. Very selfish of him.
Very selfish.
No, they did a strange thing, which is I still couldn't understand with his wife. They went to Italy for vacation during the worst time of the COVID. It's kind of crazy. I mean, they could have get COVID, of course, in Great Britain because they're living in Great Britain, but it's a terrible mistake what they did. And they developed COVID with both of them, strange kind of, but strange, but not completely strange. The COVID attacked the pancreas, both for him and for her. And unfortunately, he died. They couldn't save him. They managed to save her. She survived, probably with the now damaged pancreas, but he couldn't. It's almost like the pancreas died of this attack.
Not the lungs.
And,
It was
very
not organ failure.
It's called necro. I never heard about it. It's necro something, like when organ is dying.
Yeah,
like, because of the attack of this virus attack. And it's not. It was. I looked at the internet. It was actually not the only case. There are many cases of like that with pancreas, particular, but it was not only pancreas. Some of them had problems with kidneys and liver and stuff like that. So this COVID, especially when there was not any defenses against that, it was very dangerous in that sense.
Yeah.
And so this book was published after his death. He died in, I think, September or October 2020.
How old was he?
Remember how it was very dangerous. The worst case was initially in Spain, not Spain even, but in Italy. I think during the summer 2019.
Yeah,
No,
I remember.
20, I'm sorry,
North Italy, wasn't it? In the north.
Yeah, and I think and they exactly when they went, which is such a big mistake for vacation. And he never came back from that because I think he died in Italy.
Oh, so sad.
So that book, fortunately for us, that book was almost finished, and his co-author finished it completely, but it was almost finished. There is something in the introduction they said about that.
He was 59 years old because he was born 1961 and died in 2020.
Oh.
Yeah.
But you have read another book, Eugene, or do I remember wrong? But you have read another book you like.
There is the other book, if you let me find the other book. I've read several of his books. Let me put some of them good and some of them honestly not good. Let me put only good books from my point of view, from my.
Of course.
And I will not put bad books because it's interesting. The bad is really bad. In my
why are they bad?
I'll tell you why. This is my theory. He wrote about something that he's not studied well. like technology. He didn't study technology well, and it's not. This is another very good book. Let me put more. Like another about bureaucracy is I so expected from him, and it was basically not good book, which is I was really disappointed about that. This is a great book about death, the first 5,000 years. Very good book.
Yeah, it was that book you talked a lot about. You recommend it.
And this is another book, this is mostly about his political book. And I found this very interesting because it's about his participation. He was one of the founders of this Occupy movement. And this is about this 2013, a very interesting book.
I will also read. Do you have some of them digitally? Okay. I can pay you.
No, you don't.
You can send one good book.
Okay, let me send. I can send all of them. I think I have all of them.
Thank you. Zerma.
Grabber, right? Grabber.
And he writes very well, when he writes, it's very clear what he's saying.
Yeah, we should honor him. I mean, that destiny, that's the only thing we can do to spread his words. Yeah, but and back to the article, what do you think about they are talking about Vygotsky, and I wasn't clear about that. I didn't really understand what they.
For me, it's more like, I don't know whether or not, by the way, I'm surprised because we talk about Vygotsky, because early 70s, he was not well known yet in the West. He was not even well known in the Russia, in the Soviet Union.
That's strange.
So I doubt, maybe there was something they translated, I don't know. Piaget, yes. Piaget, I'm not surprised. But Vygotsky in 70, I think it's coming later. I think they're confusing with the later things. So I sent you these 4 books.
Thank you. Here, that was great.
Yeah.
So I must load them down now.
Some of them EPUB.
Well, let me tell you something very interesting.
And some of them PDF.
I got a translation of the introduction to the book, the Schwarze Pädagogik into Serbo-Croatian. I also actually held in my hands the German volume because a colleague of mine has that, and he and some other person translated the introduction. So I didn't have time to read it. Plus, I gave it for some inspection to somebody else who will give it me back in Stockholm. So I will try to read that in the future, to read much more from Katarina Ruchki, what she wrote in the introduction to Schwarze Pädagogik, at least in translation.
You have been talking about her for many years now. Do you remember
I was trying to get her texts, and I could not find them even in German online. So finally, I found that there is a translation of the introduction to her book in Serbian, and I got that from the author who translated that, from the translator. And then somebody I shared with somebody with whom I'm working now. So she wanted to see that too, but I'll get it next week. Yeah.
Oh, exciting! Then you must tell